In 1847, under the wandering glow of the crystal chandeliers that propped up the Hughes de Lopez fortune, Eleanor drifted like a shadow among silk gowns. At 24, she carried on her shoulders the label sharpened by whispers, the useless fat daughter. While her cousins paraded suitors, she collected sideways glances and hushed remarks. In the inner garden, Danya Zachary watched every bite her daughter took from a sweet roll. A young lady rules herself by her stomach, she would say. Certain humiliation would sculpt the girl's body. It didn't. Eleanor sought refuge in her grandmother's library, devouring tales of heroism and striking secret pacts with the pantry on nights of honey and butter. From his study, Don Benjamin, silver-haired and still ambitious, assessed the heiress the way one inspects cattle. His other children had multiplied alliances and businesses. This young woman, though, was a loss that grew every year. Calculating, he chose to swap shame for political gain. He would hand Eleanor to an Apache warrior, hoping to forge peace on the frontier and rid himself of household scorn. Neither he nor the provincial court was ready for what would follow. As she passed through the ranch gates into the unknown, the young woman carried not just luggage but the chance to discover the most unexpected affection the desert had ever seen. The grand night of the ball was Eleanor's last gamble. Donna Zachary had splurged on a royal blue silk gown shot with gold thread, sure the shimmer would draw eyes away from her daughter's solid frame. At the top of the staircase, Eleanor inhaled and descended. One step was enough to hear the Count of Salvatierra remark, without restraint, "Who would ever dance with a whale?" Stifled laughs sliced her skin, but she kept the posture so many governesses had drilled into her. While couples spun to the orchestra, Eleanor stayed seated among ladies nodding off from boredom. The mother-of-pearl fan trembled in her hands, trying to hide the blow. Every loop around the hall reinforced the message. Not even the priciest silk buys acceptance. At the end, the carriage rolled through the night in silence. Even her mother didn't dare bring it up. The sun had barely risen when Don Benjamin summoned his daughter to the map-lined study. He paced, mahogany cane tapping the floor. "You're 24, he began, eyes on his papers. "At that age, your mother had already sealed valuable alliances for this crest. And you," he gestured, "are an investment with no return." The words fell like hammer blows. Eleanor stood, feeling her self-worth buckle with each syllable, yet shedding no tears. A thirst for change was born right there. "I've reached the final solution," Don Benjamin announced, not lifting his eyes. "Tomorrow the fort will receive an Apache prisoner captured in a border skirmish. You'll go with him." He shoved a stamped order across the desk. The authorities agreed. "You'll be given to the warrior as his companion. You'll help keep him under control." The ground seemed to give way beneath Eleanor. "Father, are you serious?" "Absolutely," he replied smoothly. "I can't support a useless daughter. This way you'll have a purpose. You'll spare the Apache from the gallows and leave this house with a husband, even if he's a savage." Eleanor straightened, gripping the chair as if testing the world's solidity. "You're selling me to a prisoner of war. I'm giving you your first chance to be useful. His name is Cochise. Tomorrow he'll be sent to the reservation, and you'll go with him. Think of it as an arranged marriage, just with someone of your—" He let the sentence hang. Later in the stifling bedroom, she stacked her few clothes in a leather trunk. Every fold tore out a sob. She cried not only from humiliation, but for what she was leaving behind. Years of empty obedience. Yet between throbs emerged something unexpected. The idea that outside the ranch walls, she might choose her own path. Fear still squeezed her chest, but now it shared space with something new and restless, the promise of freedom. Eleanor left before sunrise, carrying only what fit in her bag and the weight of years of contempt in her heart. As the carriage cleared the mansion gates, she fixed her eyes on the road. Behind lay the whispers that called her a failure. Ahead stretched a future no one had ever explained. A few hours later, green fields yielded to Apache desert, where red rocks slash the clear sky and the wind carries legends of defiance. This wasn't ordinary exile. The Mexican government was testing a bold idea: settle captured warriors in pacified reservations, give them land, surveillance, and Mexican wives to bear children they thought would be easier to control. Under that scheme, Eleanor arrived, wearing silk that gleamed uselessly in the dry heat. Her legs shook as she stepped from the carriage. The arid air seemed to set her skin on fire, as if her body sensed something irreversible had begun. From the shadow of an adobe hut emerged Cochicel. He carried on his shoulders the strength of someone who had lived through war, and in his eyes the record of triumphs and losses. The silence between them lasted longer than the entire trip. Eleanor held his gaze, sensing that this judgment didn't rest on her lace but on a courage she hadn't known she possessed. Something in the desert, maybe the wind, maybe the man, signaled that every beat of her heart would set the rhythm of a story about to unfold. The desert sun still blazed as the soldier shoved Eleanor forward. The man waiting for her raised an eyebrow. "So this is what you bring me?" he snapped in heavily accented Spanish. "You think I'll just take whatever you throw at my feet?" The captain, a pro at breaking rebels, held his ground. "You don't have a choice, Apache. She's part of the deal. Show some respect or you're back in jail." The threat hung in the air like dust. Eleanor drew a deep breath. "I didn't ask to be here either," she said steady. "Since we're on the same board, let's decide our moves." Once the escort disappeared on the horizon, only the creak of the cabin boards and a silence as wide as the sand remained. Two strangers linked by invisible chains. "Don't mistake this farce for marriage," the Apache warned, arms folded over his bare chest. "The government wants to shame me, and you're the piece they chose." "I understand. My family used me as currency," she answered without lowering her eyes. "We're prisoners of the same game, each in our own cell." The wind carried the dry smell of afternoon. For a heartbeat, Cochicel's gaze softened as if spotting a crack in the wall. Nothing was said, yet the battlefield shifted, from assigned enemies to unlikely allies. In the first days, every move between them felt like a dance where no one stepped on the other's toes. Before dawn, Cochicel would vanish into the woods, after game and the garden beds he kept by the creek. Eleanor was left with the cabin's hush. 2 small rooms, a stone stove, stiff furniture showing off the warrior's strength. She walked the place like someone mapping unknown land, noting smells, textures, creaks. The scene changed in the kitchen. On a makeshift line, leaves and flowers hung, giving off a familiar scent. Eleanor stopped. Chamomile for calm, comfrey to seal cuts, willow for pain. Remedies her grandmother had taught her in secret, away from high society eyes. Instinctively, she sorted, tied, and arranged each bundle by its healing power. When Cochicel returned, he froze at the new setup. Breaking the ice, he asked where that know-how came from. Eleanor spoke of her healer grandmother, her love of plants, her mother's disapproval that only made learning sweeter. While she talked, he watched steady hands that never shook. In that moment, the warrior's stare shed its distrust and gained respect, opening a tiny crack. Just enough for hope and curiosity to slip through. "I use these herbs for hunting cuts and light fevers, but some still throw me off," Jimena said, choosing her words. "Can you show me how to prepare them?" The simple question widened the crack into a doorway. In the afternoons that followed, the two bent over leaves and roots. Cochise explained the power hidden in desert shrubs. Jimena answered with ways to crush, strain, and store them. Between jars and mortars, their fingers brushed by accident, lingered a moment too long, then darted away, afraid the other would notice the tremble. One day, while they mixed fat and aloe to ease burns, Jimena broke the silence. "Did you have someone before you were captured?" She kept her eyes on the mortar, but the air grew heavy. Cochise didn't move. When he spoke, his voice carried stone and dust. "I did. My wife's name was Era. She died when Mexican soldiers raided our village. After that, I fought without expecting to come back alive." Jimena looked up. Pain no balm could heal burned in his eyes. She laid her hand on his, light as a question. "I'm sorry. To inspire such love, she must have had a huge spirit." He gently squeezed her fingers. "Small, gentle, always ready with a laugh," he murmured. "The opposite of—" The sentence hung unfinished, as if he feared to admit something not yet safe to say. "The opposite of me," Jimena said, her faint smile still tinged with sadness. "Don't worry. I know exactly the woman I am, and the one I'll never be. I've known that since I was a kid." Her frankness locked Cochise's eyes on hers. He went straight to the point. "Did your family make you feel small?" "I was always the fat, useless daughter," she shot back. All I had going for me was the family name, and even that wasn't enough to land me a husband. The confession drifted like fine sand in the desert hush. Hours later, when each withdrew to a separate room, they carried a silent pact. They weren't strangers tossed together by chance, but survivors of deep scars that might heal side by side. The days that followed proved even a harsh landscape can change. Behind the cabin, Jimena raised a herb bed that insisted on sprouting under the merciless sun. Hands once soft, made for embroidery, grew calluses and the dark hue of earth, and for the first time, dirt under her nails filled her with pride. Her body settled into the rhythm of the new routine. Sun-bronzed color spread across her skin. Her shape grew lean without fad diets or constant weigh-ins. Steady work and simple food were enough. Even so, the most visible change couldn't fit in the mirror. It flickered in her eyes every time she offered healing infusions, certain that, at last, her place in the world had taken root. It only took a few months for warriors from nearby villages to cross the desert in search of the steady-handed Mexican woman. They arrived with deep wounds, high fevers, pains their shamans had already written off. Jimena treated each one, mixing Apache roots with techniques she'd learned in Sonora. Soon, a whisper drifted through the canyons. The white woman gives back the strength the desert steals. A few elders still frowned, but they saw children running again and hunters raising their bows without pain. Cochise watched these feats, trying to ignore the tightness growing in his chest. The outsider sent by the government had woven ties in the village as naturally as planting seeds. He admired the precision of her gestures, her patience with the elders, and the smile that appeared when she taught a new infusion. On a full moon night, Jimena was grinding mesquite bark for a tincture. The woody scent filled the hut when Cochise arrived with 2 cups of the tea he'd learned to brew from her. The cedar bench creaked. Outside, the desert shimmered under a silver veil. "Do you miss the life you left behind?" he asked, his voice almost a breeze. Jimena set down the pestle and lifted her eyes to the star-studded sky. She waited a moment before answering, choosing her words as carefully as drawing water into a pot. "My grandmother," she murmured. "She saw me beyond the mistakes people said I made. The rest—" She paused, searching for words that could hold the weight of the moment. "I don't miss waking up feeling like I'm good for nothing," she finally said, "or the pitying looks and whispers that cut deeper than the wind. Here, for the first time, every day hands me a purpose." The silver light outlined her profile while Cochise watched. In just a few months, the desert had reshaped her features and, more than that, filled her with strength. The beaten-down woman had given way to a healer who wears silence like armor. "I do remember my old life," he confessed. "I miss riding free through the mountains, hunting along my ancestors' trails." He fell silent, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its hardness. "But I no longer long for loneliness. After Era left, I thought nothing remained." Eleanor sensed the risk of that terrain and asked anyway, "And now?" "Now I wake up every morning hoping to see you in the garden," he went on, letting each word fall unguarded. "I look forward to our talks at night and to seeing your hands give life back to my people." He drew a deep breath. "You returned something I thought was buried. You, Eleanor." Her name vibrated between them and her eyes burned. Hot tears flowed after years of drought. "Cochise, He stepped closer, giving her room to back away. When she stayed, he cupped her face like something newly discovered and kissed her, light as a promise still waiting to be spoken. The kiss was brief, almost a whisper, the fruit of months of respect and understanding. As they pulled apart, Eleanor felt a tremor that had nothing to do with fear. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I'm different from your first wife. You're you," he cut in. "I'm not trying to replace Era. You're Eleanor, the woman who saved my soul in the desert and proved that love is born in the least likely places." Then came the richest months they had ever lived. Their bond grew solid, sustained by respect and a shared purpose. Eleanor moved through the hut lightly. Cochise laughed so much that visiting warriors were startled. He went out to hunt and gather roots. She tended whoever arrived sick. In the afternoons, they prepared remedies side by side, their steps as synchronized as a silent dance. At night, beneath the stars, they traded stories and laughter, discovering new contours in each other. One evening, Cochise said, "My tribe needs to open trade routes. Your preparations could be exchanged for tools and food. You'd heal bodies and relationships. The idea touched Eleanor. The chance to reach beyond each patient lit a new meaning in her. Would the other tribes accept me? She asked, caught between hope and fear. They already have, he smiled. Results speak for themselves. And there's more. My brother is planning an alliance among several Apache nations and wants me in the negotiations. We'll have to cross lands outside Mexican control. Eleanor's chest thumped like a drum. And now, she breathed, anxious. Now we can stand before my people's elders, Cochicel said, eyes shining. You'll be my wife by tradition, and if we wish, we'll have children. The word children rang inside her like a bell. For years she'd been labeled useless for not bearing heirs in the marriage her family imposed on her. Here in the desert, the chance to build a home founded on affection felt like a miracle. The spell, however, shattered with the crack of hooves. On the horizon, green-coated shapes were moving in. Cochicel frowned. Run to the cabin, he muttered. Something smells like a trap. Too late. The soldiers already had them in their sights, and leading the vanguard was a figure that chilled Eleanor's spine. Rodrigo Hughes de Lopez, her older brother, accompanied by the captain who, months earlier, had dragged her out of the capital. Rodrigo dismounted with the air of a man who's never heard no. 28 years old, uniform spotless despite the dust, neatly trimmed mustache, eyes as cold as their father's. The suspicion pinching his brow flipped to outright surprise when his sister stepped out of the hut. She was nothing like the hunched, plump woman he remembered. Eleanor walked forward with her chest high, skin firm and sun-darkened, muscles shaped by daily work, and a gleam of purpose that unsettled him. Even more disturbing was seeing Cochicel step in front of her, and realizing she took that protection as natural. "Eleanor," Rodrigo called, voice tight, "I've come to take you home. This experiment is over." Unfazed, she pointed to the herb garden around the cabin. "This is home, Rodrigo. I found my place here," she said, steadier than she'd ever been in the mansion. The detachment's captain raised official papers. "Mrs. Hughes de Lopez, there are reports you're being held. We can escort you back to the city if you prefer." Cochicel stepped up, solid as a rock under the sun. "No one's holding her," he declared in clear Spanish. His hand brushed his machete, but Eleanor, with a light motion, kept the steel at rest. "Captain, I stay because I want to," she said. "Here I heal the wounded. I'm valued for what I do, not for my last name. Rescue me from what?" Rodrigo studied her like he was searching for cracks in stone. "Look at what you've become," he muttered, half contempt, half envy. "Dressed like an Indian, living in a shack. You call that living?" "I call it living when I wake up knowing my hands save people and I'm loved for more than a coat of arms," she shot back, every syllable sharp. Silence hung in the air. Rodrigo glanced at the captain. "Obvious brainwashing," he declared. "Father allowed force if necessary." Cochicel stepped forward, a broad shadow between Eleanor and the guns. For a second, the whole desert held its breath. "You'll have to kill me first," he said, voice steady from having faced death before. Rodrigo lifted his chin and snapped his fingers. 6 rifles rose, surrounding the pair in a ring of steel. For Eleanor, the bubble of the past months burst. The name Hughes de Lopez returned like a shining shackle. Her chest sank, but she kept her head high. "I'll go," she said, barely above a whisper. She turned to Cochicel. A contained fire burned in his eyes. "I don't want anyone bleeding for me." "I won't abandon what we built," he replied, gripping her shoulders. "They won't shove you back into the life that was killing you quietly." Eleanor traced the scars on his face with her fingers, trying to memorize a map. "If there's love, let me protect it. I'll come back, I promise." The escort set off under a dry sky. The silence felt heavier than the heat. Each hoofbeat sounded like a hurried clock. Rodrigo rode beside her, his gaze split between triumph and respect. Halfway along, his voice broke the emptiness. "Does he really love you, or is he just taking what he's given?" It was the first personal question in years. "He loves me," she answered firmly, "and I love him. With him, I'm whole, not a mistake to be fixed." Rodrigo fell silent. He let his horse move ahead while the desert creaked around them, as if it too waited for the next twist in the story. "Father decided you're going to the Sisters of Charity convent," Rodrigo said, his voice swallowing his own convictions. He says you need to atone for your sins." The name of the place tightened Eleanor's chest. That's where rich families sent women they deemed inconvenient. A routine of prayers and penance hid invisible bars. It was a cloister that smelled of incense, where echoes of the world never entered. "And you?" she asked, holding her brother's gaze. "Do you also think I need to be purified?" Rodrigo blinked, as if searching for courage in every syllable. "I think," he murmured, "you're the first among us to touch something real, free of money, power, or appearances." He paused, choking back his own hesitation. "Father envies that. You found what he never had, true love." The sentence reignited in Eleanor a thread of light the last few days had almost snuffed out. Maybe there was a crack there through which the truth could slip into other minds in the family. The sun was leaning into the afternoon when the horses passed through the gates. Don Benjamin waited on the steps, face hard, arms crossed. Yet the moment his daughter's feet touched the ground, his face twisted in surprise just as Rodrigo's had hours earlier. And the spark of that shock raced along the mansion's facade, hunting for tinder to set ablaze. The woman who returned looked nothing like the fragile figure who had left for the desert. "Jimena," Don Benjamin murmured, stepping forward carefully. "You've changed." "I discovered where I belong," she replied, chin up. "I learned to see my own worth." He studied her in silence. The once weary body now stood firm. Her skin carried the tone of someone who lives under the sun. Her eyes held the spark of someone who charts her own course. What really unsettled him, though, was the absence of that gentle obedience he had always demanded. "Tomorrow you'll go to the convent," he announced, trying to reassert his old authority. "The sisters will tear out those pagan influences." "I won't," she answered without raising her voice. "I won't let them erase what I built." The air thickened. Even the wind sweeping the garden seemed to hold its breath. Benjamin couldn't remember the last time he'd been challenged so directly. In that moment, Jimena's past and future collided. Meanwhile, word of her return raced through Mexico City like dry kindling catching flame. By noon, carriages and onlookers formed a ring in front of the mansion, eager to see the Apache girl. They expected to find her broken, maybe covered in scars. Instead, they saw her step onto the main balcony, back straight, gaze steady, presence pushing the murmurs into silence. Among puzzled faces, many wondered, what happens when a woman who's been reborn refuses to go back into the cage? Don Benjamin sent for Father Sebastian, head of the Sisters of Charity convent, to gauge the health of Eleanor's soul. The priest, a veteran at taming unruly heiresses, entered the hall carrying ready-made prayers and lectures about obedience. But when he saw the young woman, he found something that didn't fit his script. She held the calm gaze of someone who had already chosen her own path. "Daughter, living among infidels leaves invisible marks," he warned, certain that guilt would make room for his plan. "Within sacred walls, prayer and fasting will bring your heart back to purity." Eleanor listened without looking away. When she replied, her voice carried no rebellion or plea, just conviction. "I spent months tending the wounded, washing sores, sharing what little I had. I never felt God so close. If that's a stain, then I don't understand the weight of virtue." Her words rang like bells at the wrong hour. The priest, unsettled, exchanged a quick glance with Don Benjamin, who gripped his cane as if searching for solid ground. They expected laments. They got affirmation. Eleanor went on, following the sway of the curtain dancing with the breeze. "I'll serve where doors are open. I'll do nothing behind bars." The crack of her father's cane cut the air. He stood, face flushed. "As long as you live under my roof, you'll obey my orders." The silence that followed wasn't surrender but a breath held before the next wave. The tension promised to surge, and no one seemed willing to back down. "I won't accept this roof as a cage," Eleanor said, her voice as calm as a lake at dawn. "If I must, I'll leave before the moon reaches mid-sky. I'd rather the cold ground of the courtyard and the firmament as my blanket than a gilded bed raised like a grate." The hall held its breath. Danya Zachary, who had watched her daughter's change in silence, asked in a faint voice, "Eleanor, what flame was lit in you? You've never spoken like this." "I found out who I am," she answered, meeting her mother's eyes with steady affection. "My worth doesn't depend on a husband's signature or the weight of new last names. It grows in what I do for others. In the pain I ease, in the hands I lift. A hoofbeat broke the silence. The floorboards shook as hooves hit the courtyard. Everyone turned to the window. A cloud of dust was rolling in unchecked. From the whirlwind burst Cochicel, thrust to the front on his warhorse. He wasn't alone. Behind him rode Apache warriors lined up like a living spear, followed by settlers whose faces Eleanor recognized from the healings and words of comfort she had offered them. The Apache touched the ground with a panther's grace. His hand rested on his spear, but his eyes sought only Eleanor. No one moved. Even the clock over the fireplace seemed to lose its rhythm, hesitating in that instant that would decide who took the next step. Cochicel reached the mansion's main gate without hurrying his pace. He wore his war armor, but the white feathers tied to his braids declared he had come in peace. His guards stayed on horseback, forming a protective ring that did not raise weapons. The rumble of hooves brought Don Benjamin to the threshold, followed by armed servants. "How dare you?" he tried to shout, but his voice wavered. Cochicel answered in clear Spanish, loud enough to carry to the back of the courtyard. "I came for my wife. She chose to live with me and was brought here by force." Up on the balcony, Eleanor recognized the call. Her heart raced. Before anyone could stop her, she practically flew down the stairs. "Stop her!" Don Benjamin yelled. Too late. Eleanor ran to Cochicel and hurled herself into his arms. He held her gently, like someone picking up something one of a kind. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, her face against his chest. "You promised you'd come back," he said, pulling back just enough to look at her. "But I decided not to wait." A settler in plain clothes stepped forward. "Señor Vasquez de Lopez," he said, respectful but firm. "I'm Sebastian Gonzalez. This woman saved my granddaughter's life when the city doctors had given up. She also ended my wife's pain with the herbs she made." His words hung over the courtyard, eroding Don Benjamin's authority and making his men trade uneasy looks. Settlers crowded around Don Benjamin, forming a chorus of memories. First spoke a young midwife. On the night when all seemed lost, Eleanor guided a risky birth and brought both mother and baby safely through. Then an old man limped forward. He told how disease had already eaten at his leg when the healer arrived with poultices and soft songs, saving both his stride and his dignity. Each story added another layer, revealing a woman who had turned service into destiny. Sebastian Gonzalez straightened so everyone could hear him. "This woman," he declared, opening his arms to the crowd, "isn't a captive. She's this community's living remedy. Taking her away would hurt not only her husband but all of us." Father Sebastian, silent until then, stepped forward, his habit swaying with each stride. "Señor Hughes de Lopez," he said calmly, "I've spent my days discerning divine callings, and in this I see genuine fire. To deny it would be to oppose the Creator's will." The words left Don Benjamin nowhere to hide. The evidence allowed no excuses. His daughter had found joy, and more than that, a purpose that made lives bloom around her. The moral weight of those testimonies was impossible to ignore, especially under the colony's watchful eyes. Doña Zachary, moved by an old impulse, stepped forward. The gaze that once searched for her daughter's faults now traced every gesture with silent awe. There, among grateful faces, she no longer saw the girl once labeled stubborn, but the woman sowing hope with her own hands, and she finally grasped the worth of that unshakable spirit. A shaky whisper cut through the silence. "Daughter, forgive me," the mother pleaded, tears in her eyes. For years she had lived under the fear of others' judgments. Only now did she realize how much she had ignored Eleanor. The hug that followed was more than comfort. It was the first stitch in an old wound. "I forgive you, but my path is beside the man I chose, serving whoever needs us," Eleanor declared. Cochicel then turned to Don Benjamin. "Sir, I ask for your daughter's hand. I promise to love her, protect her, and blend my tradition with hers to heal these people." The rancher saw a new light in his daughter's eyes, felt the weight of love in the young man's words, and heard murmurs of gratitude from those she had healed. His voice came out low but steady. "You have my blessing." 5 years flowed by like a river. On the porch of the house overlooking the community built around the clinic, the couple watches the sunset while 2 children play among herb beds. Families from different backgrounds have put down roots there, drawn by the idea of a place where differences are celebrated. Eleanor, now respected throughout the region, leans on Cochesel's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" he asks, as if revisiting a favorite chapter. "Never," she answers, following their children's laughter. "Here I found purpose, home, and love. What more could I want?" Outside, the wind carried promises of new paths. Thank you for watching to the end. If anything here struck a chord with you, drop a comment. Your voice helps this conversation grow. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video, where new journeys unfold. Until then, take care of yourself and spread kindness wherever you go.